Hellos, guys. I hope you are all well and keeping safe during these challenging times. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all our viewers. We're very excited to have you today. And before we actually just carry things on, I'd just like to let anybody know who doesn't know me that I'm Lelo Nyoni, and I'm founder of Atusaya Boutique, a children's boutique which manufactures clothing for ages 0 to 8 years. And we are a lifestyle brand. And we also like to extend and have value, by adding knowledge, information to all our mothers and fathers and caregivers. So, with anything that you may want to know more about, please do let us know. To also let you know, today we'll be joined by psychologist Kim McKay. We'll be talking about toxic positivity. That's always a bit of a tongue twister for me. And just to let you guys know that she'll be here in a moment. She'll be joining us shortly. But before we get there, I'd like to just also, let you know what I've been experiencing when it comes to toxic positivity. I feel like it's something that we may all experience but not have any knowledge of. So at times I do find myself either running away from reality or just running away from life itself, trying so hard to be positive about what goes on in my life and trying so hard to just be looking forward, and not backwards in general. And I found that it does help to some certain extent, and it's also hurtful not only to myself but for my children. I'm actually liable for what I teach my children at this moment in time, and what I teach them is going to imprint for the rest of their lives. So I'll talk about it more because Kim has just joined us. I'll just express a bit more about what I've experienced during this session, and I hope that it's going to be insightful for all of you, if not most of you. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I just had to set myself up nicely over here.
No problem at all. No problem.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a long week.
Yeah.
It's been a
Yeah.
long week, so I'm really glad that it's Friday.
Yeah.
But
Most
yes,
definitely.
been challenging, but good. Yeah.
Good.
Overall, a good week. Yes. How are
Okay.
you?
Uh, I'm good. I'm good too. I'm getting there. It's also been
Mhm.
challenging.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that it's gonna be fruitful and, looking forward and
Yes.
not backwards.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with
So I just gave a brief explanation of my experience
you.
with toxic positivity. And for
Yeah.
those who've joined us, we are joined by psychologist Kim McKay. And our topic at hand is toxic positivity. So before I get into what I've been talking about, expressing my experience with it, I'd like for you to please do let us know what is toxic positivity.
Okay. So I think before I give the definition of what toxic positivity is, I want to start with I was trying to do some research on,
Yeah.
what people know about toxic positivity and so
Mm.
on. And I came across a website called The Science of People.
Mm.
It's an American website, and they did a study on about just over 230 people and asked them if
Mm.
they knew what toxic positivity is. And
Yeah.
over 75% of those people said they had no idea what toxic positivity
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
However, after they explained the definition of toxic positivity,
Yeah.
there was, I think it was 67% of people then agreed and said that they had actually experienced toxic positivity, which I
Yeah.
thought was very interesting. It seems like
Yes.
it's a new word, a new term that's come up,
Yeah.
but I think most of us have experienced what toxic positivity is.
Most
So,
definitely.
toxic positivity is when we sort of overgeneralize and deny our negative experiences, right?
Mm, mm,
Or our positive experiences. So, in excess, we talk about how life is so good, everything is so positive,
yeah.
and we negate our negative emotions or feelings. So
Mm,
that's really what toxic positivity is. And the
mm,
problem with this is that it produces denial, it puts you in a state of denial, and it completely minimizes the human experience, because as a
yeah.
human, you experience both what we call positive and negative feelings, right?
Mm,
So by
mm,
negating or completely overlooking the negative emotions, you completely negate the human experience, and
mm,
so you start to live a very inauthentic life. And
mm.
of course, when you live from a place of inauthenticity, it produces a lot of other issues as we
Most
go along.
definitely. Yeah.
Right, right.
Mm.
So that's really what toxic positivity is being positive
Okay.
all the time. You know,
Okay.
you have terms like, oh, positive vibes only, or
Yeah. Yeah.
no negative Nancy's, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you in a space like that that only wants to look at the positive side of things, that's when we
Mm,
talk about
mm.
toxic positivity.
Do you mind giving us a practical example of it so that we're able to identify ways to realize and to note that we are actually experiencing toxic positivity?
Toxic positivity. I can think about, I mean, I think our conversation that we just had when I
Yeah.
came on, you know, it was how are you doing? Oh no, you know, we're looking towards the positive. We just
Yeah.
we feel the best, or
Yeah.
um, you know, only it was a terrible week, but actually I'm saying it was a fantastic week, you know, and
Yeah.
negating the
Yeah.
negative
Yeah.
experience or not
Yeah.
speaking about the negative experience. So it's any time that you find yourself invalidating your emotions or invalidating
Okay.
the emotions of others, and particularly the negative emotions of others.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
when you find yourself, you know, in a toxic positivity space.
Yeah.
Another example could be something like, I'm just trying to think of a practical example. Something like, for instance, your child stubbing their toe
Yeah.
on on the table, and
Yeah.
you know our automatic response is, oh, you're gonna be fine, or you're okay, or
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah.
fine, or distract him, or you know it's not such a big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
That's our automatic response, and that's kind of toxic positivity, because it's
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously sore, it's painful, and in that
Yes.
moment that you should have freedom to express
Yes.
that
Most
emotion,
definitely.
the pain,
Yeah.
or this, you know, the suffering, whatever, the sad emotion.
Mm, mm.
So those are some of the examples of toxic positivity.
Okay. A quick question, since you touched on the child.
Yes.
There was an article which I read which said, as a parent, you you can and may assist your child in identifying their emotions. So if they're feeling sad or if you've upset them, it's a good way of saying, okay, are you upset? You know,
Right.
and they actually acknowledge the fact that, okay, I'm upset. So skipping that process with your child, could that be a loophole of creating toxic positivity?
I think it's, yes. I think it's even more than a loophole.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to give you justification for what I'm saying. So the effects of toxic positivity is that it brings about a couple of different things. So
Yeah.
on one level, it brings about sort of feelings of shame, right?
Yeah.
So one of
Yeah.
my favorite authors, her name is Brene Brown. She says that, you know, the minute we start to silence things or we feel judged by things, we end up then not wanting to share or not having the space to be vulnerable, all right? And then that brings about that feeling of shame. So when you feel the feeling of shame, you don't want to share because it feels shameful. It's something, and then you choose to silence your emotions, and in silencing your emotions, you promote the suffering, or you amplify the suffering of whatever kind you're going through, right? So that's one of the consequences. Then another consequence is that toxic positivity completely suppresses in negative emotions. So you find yourself in a space where you cannot talk about negative emotions, and often you might be surrounded by people that don't create a space to talk about negative emotions, right? So in the example of what you were saying about the child, if we don't create an environment for our children to be able to learn about their emotions, and not only in learning about their emotions, but be able to express their emotions, then we are basically creating an environment where negative emotions are not allowed, and we only talk about positive things and happy things. And then you suppress those emotions, right? And suppressed emotions have very specific effects on the body and on the mind. And usually what happens is those suppressed emotions that have come now from childhood present as anxiety, depression. So you're creating essentially a breeding ground for mental illness to develop. And I think that's why this topic is so important. Especially when it comes to children, and creating an environment where we talk about our emotions and we express our emotions, because it can have long-lasting implications going forward.
That's actually quite interesting. And for children, you've stipulated that it is quite important to help them to acknowledge their emotions and be able to express them, whether good or bad. So with adults, do you have any pointers on how to actually help us, note and be accepting to our emotions, because it's quite tricky, especially for me sometimes. I do struggle with identifying emotions that I'm feeling. Most of the time, my mind goes on flight mode. That's what I've noticed about myself. I do really just go on flight mode, and I'm just living. And when I now pop out of it, then I guess that would be the time I would now start acknowledging that, okay, I wasn't feeling okay. Or when I'm past that experience, that's when I actually start realizing, I actually wasn't okay, and I thought I was okay. I do know that I actually did explain this a bit when we were talking about postpartum. So how are there any pointers of helping us as adults when it comes to that?
I think you bring up something that is so important, and that's to live as consciously as possible. And what I mean by that, it's a very difficult practice. Look, it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but to try and be consistent in living as consciously as possible. And what I mean by that is to try and be present in the here and now.
Okay.
And there are various ways to do that, various ways to start living or introducing this into your life. Practices such as mindfulness, practices such as meditation, just to bring your brain and yourself to the present moment and the here and now. And that is sort of a practice that not only applies to toxic positivity, but I think to life in general, is to live a more conscious life and a more present life, because that way you can really live from an authentic place and be able to experience the true full human experience, right? So I want to sort of start by saying that. The second thing is in living consciously. So when you are living from a present place, from being in the present moment, it can be quite or it can become quite easy to identify when you're not feeling okay. Right?
That's true.
Because you've silenced the noise that's around, and you really focused on your body and the signs and the flags that your body are giving you when something's off, when you're not feeling okay, when something's affected you in a specific way. Right.
Mm.
So now if I just quickly sort of backtrack and say, let's say you're not living from a conscious place, like you explained before, and you know, life is busy, and you know, I think that's where most of us find ourselves in any case.
Yeah,
Then
yeah,
my pointers would be that you must make time for yourself to be able to reflect, especially even if it's a couple of days later or whenever it presents itself and you realize that you haven't quite been okay, or you're experiencing an
yeah,
emotion that you can't name, or you're not really sure what's going on with yourself. It's important then to take some time and
mm,
set time aside to just reflect.
yeah, yeah.
Good ways to reflect would be, for instance, journaling. So something that I say to my clients quite often is to spend a little bit of time and journal, but only journal about the negative emotions.
Mm, mm,
So it's not a dear diary situation, or you know,
mm,
trying to talk about all the positive things that have happened. The
yeah,
point is to focus on all the negative emotions that you
mm,
have experienced throughout the day, or over the couple, you know, a few days or whatever, and then you
mm,
sit and you journal about that experience.
yeah,
So
yeah,
name the emotion. When you name the emotion, see if you had a bodily experience that went with that emotion, so that
mm,
next time you can recognize that as a sign that you might be feeling a particular emotion.
yeah,
Right, so get into the practice of doing this. So what journaling does is it makes your emotions more tangible because you can
mm-hmm,
see it on a piece of paper. And then the second part of that is that you're able then to track and see your patterns of emotions and what bodily experiences go with your emotions. And this is
mm,
how we become more emotionally intelligent about how we are feeling.
mm,
And I think
okay,
once you become more in touch with how you're feeling, it might be easier to relate to others and be
yeah,
able to not necessarily transfer that toxic positivity to others
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah,
that would be some of my pointers. Also, talk about your emotions.
mm,
Don't you know, to not spoil the mood, bring up how
mm,
you're really feeling.
yeah,
So
yeah,
talk from an authentic place and experience your emotions in an authentic place, and
yeah,
communicate about it
mm,
as well. So
mm,
these are just a few practical ways that you can try. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm guessing they don't only apply to adults and caregivers, they also do apply to children.
Absolutely.
Especially, I would say, if not daily, weekly, just journaling experiences, not only at school, but wherever they may have gone, wherever they may have visited. I think
Right.
it could be a good practice for them to have an experience. Okay,
Right.
since we went to Granny's place, please do let
Yeah.
me know what your feelings were. What did you
Mhm.
experience?
Mhm.
Because at
Mhm.
times you may not have been present, when they actually
Right.
didn't feel well, and they
Mhm.
felt that they've had to suppress it and weren't able to tell you about it. So, um, also asking them to participate in acknowledging what they may have experienced
Right.
emotionally during traveling or whatever the case may be could be
Right.
good.
Yeah.
So I
And
do like that.
yeah, and the thing with children is they learn by seeing, right?
Yes.
So you have to create that space for them. You
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
create the space where it is safe to talk about emotions,
Mm,
where it
mm,
is safe to talk about the not so nice emotions,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you're creating that space for them, then it will be easier for them to be able to communicate about it. And also then
Yeah.
age appropriately. So a 2-year-old, for instance, is not going to have the repertoire in their vocab to be able to accurately describe how they're
Yeah.
feeling. But
Yeah.
perhaps in play, play
Yeah.
with them and talk about the emotions of the
Mm,
animals or the kitties or whatever that is, so that you
mm,
normalize,
mm,
and also normalize the negative emotions as well,
mm,
because
mm,
that's how they will learn that this is a safe space to talk about how
mm,
I feel, or to express
mm, mm.
my emotions.
Yeah, that's actually quite
Mm-hmm.
true. And
Mm-hmm.
so in your description,
Yeah.
what does it mean to be well or to be okay? Like, if you would put it in your personal words.
I think it's such a robust, I'd have to give a very robust definition of that.
Yeah.
But I think at the base of it, to be well, for me means that I feel like there's balance in my life and I'm able to live from an authentic place. That's what it means for me personally to be well. And then I think if we extend that, is my wellness has to be able to relate to me being able to function. So am I able to carry out my job correctly? Am I able to socialize and interact with people? Am I able to, pursue further development and those kind of things? So I think that's how I relate my wellness and see where I'm at. If I can see if it's affecting my functioning, or if I can feel like my fuse is getting a little bit shorter, then perhaps I haven't been engaging as much as I should with some of these negative emotions. So I think that overall would be my definition of wellness.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And I think adding to that, I just want to say that we all fall into the trap of toxic positivity.
Yes.
I think it's become so ingrained in our culture, in our, in society in general. Toxic positivity has really become quite ingrained. So, and we don't even realize it most of the time. So it's important to be able to identify when it's happening and then rectify it in that. You're not always going to get it right, okay?
Yeah.
And,
that's true.
but the more consistent you become with it, the easier it's going to become to recognize when you're engaging in toxic positivity. And then it becomes easier then to rectify that behavior.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true.
Right.
And in one of your posts, you've actually stipulated that we should normalize accurate thinking. So please do elaborate more on that one.
Right. So in that post, it was talking about accurate thinking in relation to toxic positivity, right?
Yeah.
So accurate thinking in that specific post was relating to the fact that we need to think holistically and not only focus on the positive stuff, because that's what toxic positivity is. It's the focus on everything positive and only the positive things. So accurate thinking there is to be able to authentically express how you're feeling, and that means talking about the negative emotions as well, or talking about the emotions that are not as comfortable as the other emotions. So we need to normalize that type of thinking, that it's okay to talk about having a bad day. It's okay to say that life sucks. It's okay to say that you're jealous or you're resentful or you're angry about a certain situation, because that's part of the human condition. The human condition is to have negative emotions. And I think even the connotation of saying negative emotions already, the way we language about things is so important. So, it's so important to, even saying negative emotions, I think is already like wrong to begin with.
Yes.
Talking about the range of emotions and how some might be more comfortable than others. And accurate thinking then reflects that. It reflects the fact that we can talk about the range of emotions, from the ones that we are really comfortable with to the ones that we are not so comfortable with, and that we find difficulty dealing with. And that's the kind of thinking that we need to promote more, that we need to practice more, rather than this toxic positivity.
So I'm just going to give you an example, and I would want to know if it actually is toxic positivity or is it something else. So for instance, let's say I experienced a very bad, I have a setback, right? And I wouldn't even know how to put it. For example, I have a setback which I feel is major, right?
Okay.
And I speak to somebody else and they're like relating, like, oh my gosh, I feel for you, you know. It's just a minor setback, you know. You're gonna be able to pull through, you know. And I was able, let's say at that time, to explicitly tell the person that I don't feel like it's actually a minor setback. To me, it's not a minor setback. It's very bad, you know. And obviously a person would then now feel like you are exaggerating the point, your point, you know. And you may also feel like, okay, maybe I may have exaggerated, because they probably may have pointed out like, oh my gosh, it really isn't major, you know. There's so many problems in the world, you know. There's people who are starving, you know, people who do this and people who don't do that, you know. So really it's literally just minor. What Where does that, I personally feel like it's toxic positivity. And I feel like you're also belittling my feelings to some certain extent. I feel like it would be just in a spectrum of, I don't think I would talk to you ever again in my life, you know, because if you're managing to belittle my experience based on somebody else's major experience and not allowing me to express myself as an individual to you and not as a general population, you know, because ultimately when I speak, it's me. It's not a, I'm not speaking on behalf of the population, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. So please do assist with that one.
I want to unpack that because I think that is a really good example. That is absolutely toxic positivity. Let's just
Yeah.
start there. Okay. But I want you to also be able to see the following. That
Yeah.
whole process of, ah, you'll be okay, or, you know, there are bigger problems in the world, that is a
Yeah.
process of invalidation, right?
Yeah.
So you feeling like, oh, questioning yourself, am I really feeling this way? Am I
Yeah.
exaggerating? What's
Yeah.
happening? That's a process of invalidation that is taking place because
Yeah.
you are expressing your authentic feelings, and then you're
Yes.
getting
Yes.
the external stimuli, or the external person coming to you and saying, well, no, that's not really what you're feeling, or what you're
Yeah.
feeling is not important, or it's not that big of
Yeah.
a deal. So
Yeah.
that process then invalidates you, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to question yourself.
Mm. Mm.
So the implications of this is the following, and you really clearly illustrated that. The implications are, we have a problem with communication, number one, because you're
Yeah.
not listening to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second implication is that now we're going to have a relational issue because I no longer
Okay.
want to be in your presence,
Yeah.
right? The third thing is that it has an implication on your self-esteem because now you're
Yeah.
starting to think, are my feelings valid? Am I exaggerating? Is there something wrong with me?
Mm.
Etc.
Mm.
etc. Right?
Mm.
So that's another thing. And then that process of shutting down and maybe not wanting to share anymore is the
Mm.
shame that I spoke about earlier on,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And is also the then causing you to suppress your emotions and say, you know what,
Yeah.
I don't want to share. It's not
Mm.
safe to share in this space. So
Mm.
those are the
Mm.
implications of toxic positivity. It
Yeah.
has far-reaching effects.
Mm.
And I think that that example illustrated it so perfectly in the
Mm.
sense that it affects every single aspect of relationships, of you know, individual to person and
Yeah.
individual themselves having to
Yeah.
experience all those things.
Yeah.
So I agree
Yeah.
with you completely. Absolutely, toxic positivity.
Okay. And to also just give an example, with regards to children, I'm even scared of doing this one because people may get touched. So,
Yes.
let's say, for instance, you decide that, okay, when we go visit, let's say my mother's place, you know, I'm very comfortable with how my mom raised me. Um, I may or may not see anything I may improve, you know, with regards to her teachings and so forth and so on. So when now my child would probably be like, oh my gosh, mom, you're hurting my feelings. I'm like, ah, dude, just get over it. I also grew up like that. My mom also used to, talk down on me, but look how I came out. I'm good. I'm good. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
such things. So I know I may be, a little exaggerating, but in the sense of talking like that to your child, um, what would the process be? Would toxic positivity also influence it? Even though I may feel like it may not necessarily be toxic positivity, but you are personally trying to see the brighter side of what was obviously a negative experience to you, but yet you don't want to admit it because it was done and you came out okay. So please,
Right.
enlighten us on that.
Yes, you came out okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so those are also the effects of toxic positivity, having
Yeah.
to make light of a very serious situation and make
Yeah.
light of a situation where you were clearly hurt and also affected in a negative way. Right. And so that is toxic positivity on display there, because you're basically telling your child, it's not so bad, like you'll live, you'll get over it. And I turned out fine, so you'll be fine. Again, that process is invalidation.
Yeah.
It's invalidation because you are invalidating your child's experience. And then starting the cycle all over again and making it unsafe to talk about uncomfortable feelings. So it perpetuates the cycle.
So is it now safe to assume that toxic positivity may also be sistered with invalidation most of the time?
Yes, I think so. For toxic positivity to exist, you have to invalidate the uncomfortable emotion.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
Because the whole process of toxic positivity is invalidation and denial of somebody else's experience or your own experience, and the overgeneralization that everything is okay and everything is positive.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Right. That's actually quite
There's
good.
also,
yes, there's also.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to say, we experience toxic positivity in many, many, many spheres. And I think another tricky one and potentially controversial one is religion.
Yeah.
There are many religions that I almost want to say force you to have to think in a positive way. And it's a tricky part because religion has its place and its level of importance. But I always say that whenever you're doing something and it's to the detriment of yourself and an authentic lived experience, then I feel like it's problematic, right? And so things like in the church, when you go into them with a problem and you hear things like, oh, just pray about it.
Yeah, most definitely.
Trust God, it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
While those statements may be true. Yeah. Those statements may be true, but again, it has the process of invalidating the person's authentic lived experience in the moment.
Yes. And you've actually raised a very good
we see
point.
that, I think, across.
Yeah. You've raised a very valid point, because I've also found, especially in religion, that it is quite practiced a lot. And I've also found that even though it's practiced a lot, when you actually look at the religion itself, that's not how it has been stipulated to be. For instance, there is I'm just going to take out of the Bible verse where it would stipulate that if a person comes to you and says, you know what, I'm in need, and you can give them bread, and you say to them, go well, the Lord be with you. it really contradicts you know, being a person in general. Because if you're able to just take the bread and just give it to the person so that they can eat and be full, and you're just sending them along, and they must just have faith, like they eat faith, like, guys, sometimes, you know, it's just being empathetic also and realistic, you know, if you're able to assist,
Right.
you know, in terms of that, do that. But like you said, it is quite controversial, and it's something that's not really spoken of. And I guess it is time to talk about toxic positivity, because mental wellness is very important. And if it affects your mental wellness, then I think you should just step back and look at your situation again and try to apply different means to help you identify your emotions, you know, and help you to be in the now and not in the future, you know, because we all want wellness. We all want to be okay. But you can't wish something away just because you're not admitting it, doesn't mean you're not gonna experience it. So I even think that also plays a role, because I mean, when you're sick, or when, you know, you're experiencing a shortfall financially, and you're like, no, don't worry, I'm not broke. I'm not broke. I'm rich. I'm rich. You know, I'm like, okay, how much is in your bank account?
Right.
You know, so I understand.
Right.
Yeah, I understand to some certain extent. You want to speak life. You know, you want to speak life into your life, but admitting at that moment that, you know what, Ne, I may be experiencing financial troubles. Then maybe if you have a problem with the word broke, you know, try using a different one. Then just say, I'm financially, you know, challenged, or whatever the case may be, if that makes you feel better. But ultimately, do identify the problem and don't ignore it, you know. So yeah, that's my personal take
I
out
think,
of
you
this.
I
So
agree with
yeah.
completely. It's not saying that you can't talk about the positive things in your life, right?
Yeah.
You can absolutely talk about the positive things in your life and look at things from a positive point of view. It
Yeah.
only toxic positivity when you are completely invalidating and negating the negative experience. And when that is your primary way of operating in the world, we constantly and consistently only look at the positive side of life. That is when the issue comes. You know, let's try and work towards a balance, and not so much, you know, erring to one or the other side. But yes, it's absolutely, this is such an important topic because it's so pervasive, and it is so, it's ingrained in so many different aspects of our lives, that we definitely need to be having this conversation a lot more often, I think.
Most definitely. All right. Do you have any tips to add, or anything you'd like to add in addition to what you've already said?
I think it's been a theme sort of in what I've said already, but at the base of it is just to try and live from an authentic place, right? Because if you're living from an authentic place, you can identify when you're not feeling okay. And when you identify that you're not feeling okay, that's the first step to realizing or to validating your emotions. And then you can have better connections with people. You can have, you know, more meaningful relationships with people if you are living from an authentic place where you experience the range of your emotions. If you're going to experience life or live from a place where you are only focusing on the negative, on the positive. And, you know, only creating space for positive talk, you're going to find yourself surrounded by a lot of superficial connections, a lot of superficial relations, because people do not feel safe to be able to engage in a vulnerable way with you. And therefore, if you aren't able to express your negative emotions or your uncomfortable emotions, if you're not able to express those, if you're not able to engage with those emotions, then you cannot hold space for somebody else. And then again, if you can't hold space for somebody else, it perpetuates the entire cycle all over again. So I think the takeaway from this is just to try and live from your most authentic place and experience your emotions as such as well.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, then. Thank you so much for joining us, Kim. I've had a very lovely talk, and I always love to reference our talks, and sessions on it being very informative and insightful, and I've learned, a lot, and I also like to practice what I've learned, and I think that's my takeaway from all of these sessions. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Lelo. I am founder of Atusai Boutique, and we manufacture children's clothing for ages 0 to 8 years. And this session has been sponsored by Atusai Boutique in partnership with Kim McKay. And for those who don't know who Kim McKay is, she is a psychologist. So we hope that you will join us next week. And for those who want to have more sessions with us, please do follow us, because we do change our specialists weekly. And we do have different topics that we talk about. And if you'd like us to talk about anything that you would want to know more about, please do let us know, and we will try our best to get a specialist who knows more about the subject that you want to know more about. And yes, that's all from me. Anything else from you? Our last take.
I just want to say, thank you very much for having me on the session, for bringing awareness to a really important topic, and I hope this has been helpful to everyone out there. So much, and I'm looking forward to many more of these talks.
Same here. All right, thank you so much to all our viewers. We hope that you have a very exciting weekend. Yes. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.